The concept of rewarding customer loyalty has been a major leveller in business growth ever since the days of green stamps. But as technology has made it easier for business to deliver better customer and employee experiences, how can dedicated loyalty programs and initiatives continue to drive profitability and success? So here to share their insights on the new loyalty landscape, I'm delighted to be joined by UK General Manager for Uber, Andrew Brem, also by Finnbar Cornwall, the sector leader for travel and auto, Google, and also Silvia Espinosa, the Chief Customer Officer at IAG Loyalty. Thank you for joining us. I want to take a broad view first of all, and Andrew, I'll come to you first. What is loyalty?
Loyalty for me is very simple. It is customers choosing to buy experiences from us rather than from our competitors. And in the case of Uber, a customer could be a rider or it could be a driver. So we have a two-sided marketplace with two kinds of customers, both of which we need to win over. But I guess a loyalty program for me is something that complements pricing, promotions, and probably most importantly, customer experience. It's just part of a suite of things that makes customers make the right choice.
The right choice for
well, yeah,
for
a little
you,
biased there,
and maybe for them, depending upon the value exchange. Then we'll come back onto that value piece in a moment. Finnbar, from your perspective,
Sure.
What's loyalty?
Well, we've done some research, and I think you had a great definition actually. But I think there are two types of loyalty. There's attitudinal loyalty. When you ask people which brands they might book with, they'll give you a list of names and brands they might want to book with. But I think the holy grail that everyone is aiming for is behavioural loyalty, which is consistent, repeated bookings with that same brand because that's their behaviour. So I think that's how we're sort of thinking about those two different types of loyalty and how they play out for brands and how you deliver that.
And Silvia, from an IAG loyalty perspective, loyalty, there's more than one type of loyalty, as Finnbar says. How do you categorise the different types of loyalty?
Yeah, so if you try to define it very simply, you would look at it as a marketing strategy that tries to be mutually beneficial for both customers and the companies. So I think that's the beauty of this strategy, that it brings value to both sides of the relationship.
So coming back, Andrew, to a point that you made around choice, why would customers, or why would drivers, like you say, there are two sides to the coin in how you operate at Uber. How do you influence that choice?
No, I guess at the heart, I think, of a loyalty program is that the value of a reward, whether it be a point or something else, is perhaps valued more greatly by a customer than what it costs the company on the other end of the spectrum. And I think that sort of exchange is at the very heart of it. And it must be to do with the psychological value of that rather than, the pure transactional value, perhaps getting to what you were saying there, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things we see that drives behavioural loyalty is actually kind of relevant content. Attitudinal loyalty comes from just a good customer experience, or that's its foundation. But the behavioural loyalty is something different and deeper, and it comes from that sort of relevant content, a bit more engagement, which I guess is exactly what you're aiming for.
Yeah, so attitudinal, behavioural loyalty. I want to throw another couple of words, transactional and emotional loyalty. How do you define, separate those two different types?
Yeah, I think a successful loyalty strategy or loyalty program should have a little bit of both, right? Mm-hmm. So the transactional side of it, it's very obvious, right? You need to have some benefit for the customer that is a reward. It could be points, it can be a discount or a specific experience that you define for that customer. But if you don't have an emotional link with that customer, that loyalty probably won't last too much in time, right? So the lifetime value of that customer probably won't be too much. And that emotional connection and that somehow irrational relationship that you can create with the customer, it's quite key if you really want to have like a successful strategy long term.
I think there's one other thing about loyalty as well, when you're kind of talking about these programs, is the slight double-edged sword of loyalty, which is the higher expectations that your loyal customers have of you. And so again, our research shows that if you're a loyalty member in the US, you're much more likely to make a complaint about an experience you've had when traveling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so 3/4 of loyal customers or members of loyalty programs will make a complaint, whereas only half if you're not in a loyalty program. And it's much more about, it is about customer experience, it's about trust. So I think that's the other
that's
part
very interesting.
from loyalty.
But in a way, it's a
is that-
sign of success, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you're not emotionally connected to that brand, you're
Yeah,
like, well, stuff it. I don't care.
Yeah, it's
But-
exactly this point. As you build that emotional connection, I think your point was an interesting one. As you build that emotional connection with a customer to tie them into you as a brand, well, they now start to have expectations of you as a brand. You know, they start to, and so I think that's one of the really interesting points about. Not a loyalty point, but actually one of the interesting aspects of loyalty programs of many of the sort of customers and partners I work with, you know, thinking about that, like how do you make it work and how do you keep people engaged?
Yeah, so this happy hybrid then of the transactional value naturally, but then also that emotional connection.
I think the emotional value is also related to the notion of getting something for free, or the perception that you're receiving something for free. So, you know, if you're collecting Avios, because you're, for example, classically flying somewhere, you know, or taking an Uber somewhere, your balance builds up, and then you feel you've got this store of value that you've got for free that you could use to treat yourself. And that gives, I think, a customer a disproportionate emotional boost and excitement when you get your free, whatever it is, free gift or
actually
free experience.
it's not exactly the same to give a cashback to a customer, so that it's something that is quite transactional, that give them something aspirational, right? So with the Avios, for example, you get the aspiration of getting to this really nice trip with your friends and family, and that's something that psychologically adds more value to customers than actually some cashback or some discount in some specific products.
Loyalty programs aren't new. You know, touched on the green stamps, green shield stamps, all the rest of those programs that have evolved over decades and decades now. But one thing that has changed is the landscape in which they operate, and technology, as it continues to evolve, is changing how customers, how stakeholders interact with loyalty programs. Is technology making it easier, Finnbar, do you think, to create that loyalty? Or is there a disruptive effect that technology might be playing with regard to the traditional notions of loyalty?
Yes, there's two sides of this playing out that I see. One is there is tools and technology now that does make it easier to deliver some quite interesting things with loyalty programs. So particularly, we might talk a bit about AI, but the sort of behavioral loyalty I was talking about, that is delivering something to someone that is kind of relevant to them in that moment, and technology can allow you to do that. Understand your customer better, understand the segmentation, deliver some relevant content. So that's really interesting. But technology is also raising the bar across the board. And remember, in a loyalty program or any type of service offering you have now, you know, you're no longer competing just against, not you can perhaps consider them competitors, but EasyJet but you're competing against the best tech experience from Uber or from Amazon or from Facebook. And so in that world, you know, consumers now start to expect an experience. And I think there's something really interesting or really important as well about this notion of trust, because we see trust coming through as a key theme for consumers when they're thinking about, so particularly in travel, trust is a really, really, in fact, the most important theme. And so how businesses use data, how they use technology to deliver these relevant experiences to drive loyalty, but in a trust-building way. So that's why I think technology is this sort of double-edged. It can allow you to do it, but the bar is higher for the delivery of that experience now.
And Andrew, from an Uber point of view, you know that this is a service that has grown up in the technology first, the app first era, and in a way has made convenience and trust part of its offer. But so how has technology influenced the loyalty to your brand?
Yeah, no, absolutely. On the one hand, customer data allows one to be extremely relevant and targeted. You know, that is a great thing. On the other hand, there is the danger that by being so relevant and targeted that you're creepy, that is a bad thing. And so it's like, where do you get it right so that you're relevant and targeted but not creepy? I also think it's introduced another aspect, which is from a commercial point of view, at least the way I see it, the value of it, the commercial value of a loyalty program is to encourage behavior change rather than just behavior. So, you know, there is a sort of base element of thank you for using an Uber or flying British Airways, whatever it might be. But what I really love is for you to try a new product. You know, you can now reserve an Uber in advance. It's a new thing. Not everyone knows about it. I find a loyalty program a very interesting and potentially powerful incentive to nudge people in that direction. But one of the things that goes through my mind is, to what extent should I be rewarding purely behavior change versus rewarding base behavior, as it were? Because from a commercial point of view, you're sort of wasting your investment by rewarding base behavior and looking for incremental value by rewarding a change in behavior.
Silvia, I'll come to you. The opportunities that technology has to increase loyalty, to change customers' reactions, interactions with your brand.
I just want to repeat a little bit what I said before, that we cannot lose that human touch or that emotional connection that the customer has, because if we let it out to technology, you would end up having machines developing the experience, and therefore it would be a little bit cold for the customers.
It's a slightly more personal view, but from what I've seen sort of going around the industry and talking to people, one of the interesting things is getting that human touch at the right moment. So for example, loyalty for me can be driven sometimes by the more human beings you take out of the chain. So I love the fact that I can check into a BA flight on my app, go straight through security, straight onto the plane, talking to the fewest number of people possible, because to be very honest, they sort of slow me down, or actually I want to make that as quick as possible. And the experience of checking into a hotel, I find incredibly frustrating. I've landed, I just want to get to my hotel room. I kind of don't want to stand in a queue and have someone fill in another form, and because they've already got all my information. But there are times when I really, really need a human. And so I think that's one of the interesting things as well about the advancement of technology is getting the right balance between the human and the technology, and that's changing. And I think one of the challenges for brands that I kind of see people wrestling with is you're required almost to do all of that now, right? Like sometimes people want the in-app chat, and that's the quickest way to get an answer. But sometimes they might actually want to phone up and talk to someone. And so thinking about providing that and getting that right balance.
Yeah, it's basically giving the customer options. So if they want to go through a fully digital experience, and that's what they want because they want it to be more efficient, you're giving it to them, but you always give them that option of being able to contact someone, or at least the feeling that the customer journey has been designed, from a more human perspective.
Yeah.
You've got to know your audience, haven't you? You've got to know your consumers. And your point then about breezing through the airport with barely human interaction, yeah, that's great. But we've seen the pushback that some retailers have faced as they've tried to go to humanless checkouts or automatic checkouts, just walking out with your goods in your basket. Not everyone is happy with that kind of experience.
I think the point you're also making about the physical location is important. When you're talking about relevance, we tend to think about data to identify customer segments and behaviors, but actually just the physical moment and the surface upon which you might talk to a customer, in an in-app notification at a particular point in time, that sort of relevance can be extremely powerful. Or the fact that your Avios points appear in your account seconds after the completion of your journey. I think that's beautiful because you feel a little boost at that moment. You don't have to wait 3 weeks for this thing to appear. And so I think there's a lot of tech that, in a way, that's kind of more basic, you might argue, than segmentation or whatever. But actually, it's super important to get the value and for customers to feel great about what you're doing.
And Silvia, from an IAG loyalty point of view, with the technology that's available and the different types of experiences that we've talked about, do you feel as though brands are making the most of the opportunity, using the data that's available well at the moment, or is there still some way to go?
I think, you cannot go to any roundtable or any interview and not talking about how relevant data is for companies, but I think there are very different situations in the industry. So you have a couple of companies who are really excelling on using their data, and they really know how to use it and getting the best out of it. But most of the companies you see in the world don't really know what to do with it. So I think it's not only having that data, which is obviously very powerful, but knowing how to use that data, having the infrastructure, having the capabilities within your team, the analytic capabilities, and knowing how to actually get the insights out of that data. So otherwise it's just like, you're having like a Formula One in your parking lot and you don't know even how to drive. So what's the point?
Yeah, it's about finding the value in that big lake of data that you may have been collecting from your customers. Finnbar, what's your take here? Data is very much your fuel, your energy, your coal there at Google. Do you feel as though your customers and the people who use your services are making the most of that opportunity, of that rich source of energy?
So obviously from a Google perspective, we don't run a loyalty program per se in the way that your two great brands do. So from a Google perspective, we think a lot about building a great user experience and trust. Those are kind of the key things. Google's mission: organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. And we need to deliver on that mission to get people to kind of come back and keep using Google and Google's services. I think on the data point, it is an interesting one where, understandably, people have and start to love some of the functions that Google can provide, like the single sign-on across different platforms. And they do begin to expect Google to know a bit about them to be helpful, like the assistant that Google is building and has kind of been rolling out is designed to be helpful, to help people because it knows something about them and the data they choose to share with them. So we do see people kind of interacting with Google, expecting better answers from Google. I think a couple of things to share on that I'm starting to see in the data is that query terms, so search terms on Google that are more than 4 words long are the fastest growing types of queries. So first thing. And the second thing is what we're starting to see is people are no longer searching for the term, for example, like things to do. They're now searching for itineraries for me.
Yes.
And so we're sort of seeing this increase, therefore, in sort of more personalized searches, more conversational searches, as people are looking to kind of get more personalized views and recommendations out. And I think that's coming through sort of generative AI, which builds, I think, to this point around kind of behavioral loyalty I was talking about before, is that how you drive behavioral loyalty is like relevant content, relevant answers for people. And the search data suggests that that's something that people are looking for, certainly in travel. They're longer search terms, more conversational, more kind of relevant. And so that's where the bar is for us, as brands to kind of meet that expectation.
There was another data point I saw from an analyst talking specifically about Google and search terms that consumers use, is that the trend has changed from I want the cheapest X to the best X. There's been a cross. People are using platforms like yours not just for the cheapest version of a thing, but for the best. And whether that's a best customer experience or whether that's the most thing that's going to meet whatever their needs are as a business travel or whatever it is, that's how they're starting to use these platforms for a different type of value.
Yeah, so to build on that, we saw that change actually about 10 years ago. We saw the line change of people using best as a modifier rather than cheap. And that's just been a trend that has grown over time. What's interesting is we did see a slight dip in that over the last 2 years. We've seen a slight reversion as some of the kind of cost of living. But some of the data I see at the moment in our search is kind of playing through, which I think is interesting, is we've seen people moving away from searching for brand name reviews. So, for example, Hilton reviews. And we've started seeing people searching more for which hotel, which airline. And so in general, actually, over the last few years, we've seen the data suggests that we're seeing a slight shift away from loyalty to people considering more brands, a greater range of brands, actually with one exception. And the exception is Avios. We see an increase in people searching for Avios rather than kind of airline miles. But otherwise, the trend actually over the last few years in our search data has been away from sort of brand-led searches to more generic exploration type queries. And I think that's been a behavior that's come out a little bit post-pandemic, which is an opportunity for all brands to think about what does loyalty look like in this.
Indeed.
That's one of the factors, I think, in sort of changed landscape for loyalty.
I mean, it suggests that consumers are expecting greater intelligence in the world of Google, because it's kind of like, don't tell me about Uber, tell me about what would be the most suitable way for me to get from A to B. That's totally fascinating.
Exactly. And so
that means we have to work harder.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what I mean about the bar going up
Yeah.
in terms of the expectations. And you think about how generative AI is sort of playing out. It's very early, obviously, with generative AI. But those sorts of expectations, how that begins to play out, I think for all of us when you think about loyalty. And that's when I say there's sort of attitudinal loyalty, we can think about just that great service experience. But there's something really interesting about that deeper behavioral loyalty, that relevant content, relevant answers.
Really interesting big picture view on what loyalty is today and the role that technology plays in that. Of course, we've just left a global pandemic and we're entering a global spending crunch at the moment. People are being encouraged to spend less, save more. People are struggling, of course. So what role does loyalty play in these challenging times? Silvia?
So we're continuously doing research with our customers and trying to understand what is it that they need. And recently we've done some research to understand how they see loyalty in this post-pandemic period. And we've learned that actually customers are telling us that they don't want to stop doing these aspirational flights or these aspirational trips with their family. That's something they don't want to stop doing. And therefore, more than ever, for us, we've seen that for customers, getting those avios that allow them to do those aspirational trips is more relevant than ever.
Andrew, what have you noticed from your side in these challenging times with customer behaviours?
I think there are two things. I think one is that we're all, as businesses, having to compete harder for customers to choose us, to spend money, and therefore loyalty can be an extra differentiator. But I think there's another angle to it that is interesting, which is that a loyalty program, the points, for example, is itself a store of value. It's a little bit like that jar of pennies that you've been keeping in the kitchen for a rainy day. Well, now the rainy day's arrived, so now's the time to cash in your jar. And so, well, you know, when times are tough, this is the moment to redeem those avios or whatever, and feel massively rewarded that you didn't have to shell out your hard-earned cash in these difficult times.
Finnbar, we've spoken about some of the insights that you have. Do you find customers responding differently, searching differently, needing different things perhaps?
Loyalty looks like it's up for grabs in a post-pandemic environment. We've seen that the number of travel companies that a UK consumer will consider has gone from 8 about 9 years ago to 16 now. That's the sort of range of people they're considering. And we've seen factors coming through, trust coming through really highly in terms of what drives decision making. So there were some different factors at play post-pandemic, and I think the trust is really important because obviously people got burnt, didn't get refunds, or couldn't travel, and so that's definitely come through as a factor. But what we are seeing now in our consumer research is that price has once again become the main factor. So I think that there's a lot at play, right, in this loyalty dynamic, in this post-pandemic environment.
I want to throw that trust point over to you, Silvia, and you mentioned it earlier on as well, the importance that trust has at the moment.
So these new technologies and this new use of data that companies are doing brings a lot of opportunities for the companies and from the users, but also brings a lot of risks and a lot of worries from a customer perspective. What is this company doing with my data?
Yes.
So being transparent and being very open on how you're using data and how you're using these new AI technologies with your customers is really important. And that is very linked to trust, right?
I feel as though I have to throw this data transparency ethics point over to you, and as part of what Google does, you've got a lot of data and a lot of customer insights. How important is it to make sure that the transparency of the insights that you're able to provide, that's very, very clear, that kind of contract with your users and your customers is as clear as it can be?
I mean, it's at the core of everything that we do. So we've been thinking about this topic for a number of years. And so even a number of years ago, we rolled out a product where you can go into Google and you can see all the data that Google holds on you. And you can choose to opt out of Google holding that data on you entirely, so that we have no information about people at all. And so, for example, where that data might be used is we'll have some insight into you're interested in football. And so therefore you might be in an audience group for football. So that point about kind of marketing and relevant content. You've landed at Heathrow, you want to kind of get something. In that way, we think there's value in relevancy of some information that we can provide someone. For example, it might be more relevant for them to see some information about football and an alert about their favourite football team. But the really important thing is we give people the option then to opt out and they can see all the information that kind of Google holds on consumers. So that's been a huge piece of really, really important work that we've done over the last few years, led actually out of Europe, where legislation in Europe with GDPR has sort of continued to raise the bar around what consumers want.
And I think no matter which brand you're interacting with as a customer, it's that transparency, that trust, that is fundamental to that. So we've been talking about the changes that are happening right now around us that might influence loyalty. In terms of the fundamental thing of what loyalty is and how loyalty has traditionally worked, I buy something, I use something, I fly somewhere, I get some points in return for that. We haven't spoken about the different models in which loyalty can work, for example. And as a society, we've moved from kind of ownership, transactional relationship with brands and things in one way to something as a service or a subscription and so on. What's your take on how loyalty itself might operate a bit differently in this context, Andrew?
Well, I'm personally very fascinated by the increasing behaviour of consumers treating a loyalty currency as a store of value that they may trade in and out of. I mean, to me, that's quite an innovative behaviour. The notion that I might actually buy Avios, subscribe to Avios, keep a pile of Avios alongside my small pile of money in my Monzo account and use different things at different times.
Silvia, what's your take? If we think outside the box of how loyalty has operated up until now, where could it take us next?
So yeah, I completely agree with you. This psychology around the subscription that we've launched recently, and also this booster that we've launched is amazing. But it's quite niche also, right? This is not for everybody, so it's just for some specific groups of people that are interested.
Am I a loyalty nerd then? Is that what you're saying?
No. But it's not something completely new, right? So up until now, you've had the opportunity to get some credit cards, which you also would pay for, and that would give you the access to earn Avios in your purchases. But in terms of trends, I think there are a couple of things. Well, one has to do with gamification, and the other one with like loyalty as a force for good, right? So using loyalty for doing not only getting that retreat, but also helping others. It could be the environment, or it could be social impact, right? So we've done recently the launch of within BA Community Fund, so you can use your Avios to donate to many charities and within the crowdfunder list, but also you can use your Avios to offset the carbon that you're giving in the flight.
I think there's an acknowledgement that young people who are moving into adulthood have got a different attitude, a different view on the world, and it certainly seems to me are very, very happy to donate to social causes. And the value that we're talking about here isn't just a personal value in my pocket from loyalty, it's a value to the planet, it's a value to society, and so I can see that certainly as a real growth area there. Any different models, any different changes that you can reflect on that you might think might land in this space, Finnbar?
No, I think actually there have been some really good points. I think the things that I would kind of anchor on is that loyalty does look like it's up for grabs at the moment. So people are expecting different things from brands, post-pandemic looking for different things. So the opportunity for brands at the moment to test and to try and to learn what works for different audiences, I think has never been greater. And I think that's the great opportunity to try some different things and to see what is working for these different consumers. We've got more leisure travelers, there's a whole bunch of different trends that are playing out. It's really interesting playing on the sort of sustainability or the kind of social causes, how that could drive through.
I think we are seeing increasing complexity with the innovation here as well. So obviously many consumers are members of multiple loyalty programs. I don't know quite how we manage that, but even within a business such as Uber, we in effect have two loyalty programs. We have Uber One, which is a subscription product. So riders or eaters can choose to pay a monthly subscription for which they receive a discount on their trips and free delivery of your Uber Eats order. And for us, that can very comfortably coexist with an Avios loyalty program. But it does give us more tools to play with and therefore more complexity to manage. And part of what we're doing is to figuring out, well, what's most effective for what aim.
And probably you will find that for different groups of customers, you need different tools, right? So the personalization that we've been talking about during the whole session is going to be even more, right? So people are expecting ultra personalization. They want something for them, not only for a group of customers. And therefore having different options to offer to those customers is always going to be something good.
I think I'd like to talk finally about what happens next, about what brands who are looking to engage more, maybe to change their loyalty programs or to really just engage potential customers more, what they can be doing, whether it is some of the stuff we've spoken about already, what might loyalty look like for them in the next 12, 24 months?
I've got a couple of thoughts. One is actually very basic, which is despite the incredible technology that we have at our disposition and the advanced companies that have loyalty programs, I still think there's further to go on the absolute basics, which is in totally seamless collection and redemption. It's easy now, but I think it could be easier. So there is further work to do on that. I think the second angle is that there's a sort of level playing field coming, which is that I think until recently, a complex loyalty program was really only available to large businesses that could invest in the tech and support required for it. But now, your corner bakery's got a loyalty program, and often quite a sophisticated one, because it's a bit like the web more generally. It's all pre-configured. You can do this promotion, that promotion. In a way, I think that's great. That's great for consumers. There'll be more competition.
Which I think is a great thing, and it brings that it brings that competition and creates more opportunities for consumers as well as for brands. And Silvia, where do you see the different technologies and opportunities that we've spoken about shaping loyalty over the next few years?
Yeah, so I think the bar has been raised for all the industry, and we need to make sure that we are responding to our customer needs. But we need to do that in a simple way. So having a good execution of whatever you have defined as your customer experience or your loyalty benefits, that's quite key.
I just want to kind of build on Silvia's point first, is that an experience that drives loyalty, actually that experience is the check-in desk, the cabin crew, that kind of drives, I think, that loyalty. Or actually, if the driver is no good and the car isn't clean, that human actually experience of whatever it is you're doing is a key thing that drives loyalty. So continuing to think about, even in the future, right, how do you get that delivery of your product really, really well? But a couple of things I think that I'd love to touch on. Again, to build on your point about the ease of access to loyalty programs, local coffee shops, that's definitely playing through, but you can see that kind of playing through. And I'm now in many more loyalty programs than I was before, because it's just a digital one on my phone that I can now, and I buy 10 coffees and I get my 11th. It's interesting to think about what that then generates in terms of more likelihood for people to look out for and use loyalty programs, because I'm now using loyalty programs much more in my day-to-day. Secondly, thinking about how you design a loyalty program to meet consumer needs. And so one example of that is Expedia Group launching One Key, which is their new loyalty program, which will be the first loyalty program where you can earn and burn points on vacation rentals. And vacation rentals has been a huge kind of growth category for accommodation and travel through the pandemic. And then the third thing is, even if you kind of get that data, is how you get tie-ups between different companies. And then making that work at the back end. The tech piece is the complicated bit. I think your point about earn and burn points being done more smoothly. But in the US, sort of Delta and Starbucks, their tie-up to be able to do that, you're buying your coffee, but you're earning Delta points, and the ease with which that can, technology enables that to happen easily and smoothly, which creates quite a delightful customer experience, which drives loyalty.
Of course, the better engagement you have with customers, the more they choose to make the right choice or whatever of engaging with you. But how can the brands behind this still make sure it's working for them, that they're getting that value out of this relationship that they're nurturing as well?
I think this may sound obvious, but I think you need to be very clear on what your objectives are. And for us at the moment, at Uber, what we're brilliant at is getting people to tap a button, get a car. And actually, one of my objectives is to use our loyalty program to nudge people into trying these new products. And so for me, using loyalty as a behavioral nudge is one of my core objectives.
And Silvia, in terms of driving that value for different stakeholders and the brand itself over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what do you think the next steps that they might take should be?
Yeah, I think it's important that each of the companies that think about a loyalty strategy understand what is it that they're getting from customers by doing it, and therefore how much they can invest in that, right? So depending on how your model works, you can have more to invest into that customer and therefore create that virtuous circle, right? So you give more to customer, then customer gives you more, and then you can give them more, and so on, right?
And I think just one other point, there's a big trend in technology at the moment, which is around greater awareness of privacy and people's kind of their rights to privacy. What that means, one of the implications of it, is that first-party data, so data that the company owns themselves, is becoming even more important in an environment where technology is changing the ability to access third-party and kind of audience lists. And I think that's one of the real values for a business of a loyalty program, exactly to your point, because you start to learn more about your customers that are using your business, but you've got consent to use that. You know, in return, you're offering them a service. But that is super helpful for you to understand your business, to power your business going forward. And as tech changes, it's that first-party data is going to be really, really important to you. So there is a real intrinsic business value to understand your consumer, and loyalty can tie them in and get that consent.
It's been fascinating to chat through this and hear your perspectives on what's next for loyalty. Silvia, Finnbar, Andrew, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks.